Serengeti dusk. A leopard drags her hind leg across the brittle grass, her body thin from hunger, her stride broken. Each step presses a trail of weight into the dust until she stops near the ranger's outpost and lowers herself into the ground with a shallow groan. Her chest rises and falls unevenly, the ribs sharp beneath her coat. She turns her head once, ears twitching at the faint call of distant birds, but she does not move again. The wound is fresh. The blood darkened and sticky along the muscles of her leg. If left without care, infection will take her quickly. Samuel, the ranger on duty, had been walking the boundary of the camp when he first noticed the shape moving against the low light. At first, he thought it was a shadow cast by a passing cloud, but the limp was unmistakable. Now, as he stands at the edge of the path, he watches the leopard sink into the grass only 30 meters away. His training tells him to hold distance, to wait, to measure each step. Still, he can see how low her body lies, how her sides shudder with the effort of breathing. If she flees now, she will collapse before she clears the plain. If she stays, he may be able to help her. The evening air cools quickly in the Serengeti, the pale light fading into long strips of shadow. Insects hum above the grass, and the smell of dust carries with the breeze. Samuel crouches, his boots firm in the soil, and studies the leopard. Her head lifts slowly. Golden eyes locking with his. They do not hold aggression. They hold exhaustion. She makes no sound, no growl or hiss, only the faint tremor of her flank against the earth. He whispers under his breath, the words meant more for steadiness than communication. "Easy now, girl." The sound breaks nothing. She lowers her head again, her jaw pressing against the soil. He knows the risk is plain. A wild cat in pain may lash out without warning, but the risk is balanced against what is already certain. The wound on her leg runs deep, likely torn by a snare or a fight. The way she lays her body tells him her strength is failing. If he does not act, the night will carry her away. He takes one step forward, then another, moving in a slow arc that avoids a direct line. The leopard lifts her eyes again, but her body does not rise. She is too tired to flee. The grass bends softly beneath Samuel's boots as he narrows the gap. He stops just outside the range where a charge might strike. His body steady, his arms lowered at his sides. The leopard's whiskers twitch as a fly lands near her mouth. She flicks her tail weakly once against the ground, then stills again. The silence between them holds, broken only by her uneven breaths. Samuel feels the distance in plain terms. A few meters between a man and a predator, and the weight of survival hanging on whether she accepts his nearness or not. A faint groan leaves her throat. Not directed outward, but caught between breath and pain. She shifts her body slightly, trying to ease the leg that drags uselessly behind her. The movement reveals a deeper cut, the fur matted and stiff. Blood no longer runs fresh, but the wound is raw, dark at the edges. Samuel notes the truth clearly. If he waits too long, infection will spread. If he moves too quickly, she may force herself into a final, failing escape. Both lead to her end. He lowers himself to the ground slowly, sitting back on his heels, presenting no threat. His presence is calm, steady, meant only to hold her in place without fear. The leopard blinks, her eyes closing halfway before opening again, her breath rattling but controlled. The last of the daylight slips away behind the acacia trees, the sky bruised with violet and rust. A bird calls once from a distance. Then silence folds back over the plain. In that silence, Samuel makes the decision. He will not walk away. He will not leave her to the dark. For now, it is enough to stay within sight, to let her body rest without disturbance, to mark her place against the risk of hyenas in the night. If she survives these hours, there will be a chance. If she does not, this will be the last witness to her struggle. The leopard does not move again. She remains pressed into the grass, her flank rising in shallow rhythm, her eyes dim but still fixed faintly toward the man who has not turned away. The night grows cooler, and the plane waits in stillness, holding both predator and rescuer within the same fragile span of breath. The night had been long, but the leopard endured until morning. When the sun rose pale across the Serengeti, Samuel found her still lying in the same place, her body pressed flat to the ground. She had not moved far, if at all. The shallow rhythm of her breathing gave him his answer. She was alive, but only just. Her ears flicked at the sound of insects. And once she shifted her tail, but the strength for more was gone. He knew the next hours would decide her fate. If she stayed without help, her body would close down. If she forced herself to rise, the wound would tear further, and she would collapse long before night returned. Samuel moved slowly, carrying a small pan of water taken from the outpost. He approached in a wide curve, not walking straight toward her but easing to the side until he was within sight but not threat. Each step sank lightly into the grass, and he kept his shoulders low, his voice a whisper. "It's okay, girl," he murmured, the tone steady, even. She raised her head briefly, her eyes dull amber, then dropped it back onto the earth as though the effort was too much. Her body tensed, muscles drawn tight along her flank, but she did not rise. Exhaustion held her down more firmly than fear. Kneeling carefully, Samuel placed the pan a few meters from her head. The smell of clean water drifted faintly, mixing with dust and the iron edge of dried blood. For a long time she did nothing. The pan glinted in the light while her eyes stayed half-closed, her sides still heaving with shallow effort. He did not move closer. The choice had to be hers. If she turned away now, if she tried to bolt, the injury would worsen and the chase would finish her. If she stayed, there was at least the chance she would drink and live. The minutes stretched in silence. Flies gathered at the wound on her leg, and she twitched weakly to shake them off. The air carried the warm scent of sun-baked grass, and in the distance a lone antelope barked an alarm. Samuel watched for any sign of her decision. Finally, the leopard shifted her head inch by inch until her muzzle brushed the grass in the direction of the pan. She did not rise, only extended her tongue slowly to lap once at the surface. The sound was faint, almost lost in the breeze. But it carried the weight of survival. She drank again, her eyes barely opening, her breath rattling low in her chest. Samuel exhaled softly, though his posture did not change. He kept his body still, his hands at his knees. The leopard's movements were fragile, each swallow deliberate, her muscles trembling as though the act of drinking pressed against her limits. She paused often, head lowering back to the ground, then lifted again to take more. Each time she managed it, the balance shifted slightly further away from death. But the danger remained. If she overexerted, the stress on her body could undo the fragile hold she still had on life. The pan was half drained before she stopped. Her head fell back against the soil, her eyes shutting fully now, her body drawn into stillness. She had chosen not to flee, not to resist, but to accept the offering. It was not trust in the human beside her, not yet, but the first fragile step toward survival. Samuel studied her carefully, reading the faint rise of her ribs. She was not stronger yet, only less close to collapse. He whispered once more. The words carried low into the air. Almost there. The sound fell into the grass and did not disturb her. She lay unmoving, her body taut but no longer alert in fear. She had surrendered only because she had no strength left to do otherwise. Samuel eased back slowly, leaving the pan where it sat. He did not push the moment further. The distance was safe for them both. If she endured until evening, he could try more. If she did not, the choice she made today would be her last. The sun climbed higher, warming the plains, and the leopard rested with the faint shimmer of water still clinging to her whiskers. The risk was not gone. It had only shifted. If she ran now, her wound would tear. If she stayed, she might yet accept life for another day. The sun dipped low behind the acacia trees, drawing long shadows across the grass. The heat of the day softened into dusk, and with it came the quiet hour when most predators stirred to hunt. But the leopard did not rise. She lay where she had been all afternoon, her head low to the ground, her body curved protectively around her injured leg. The pan of water remained near her side, half drained. She had not moved since drinking. Samuel knew this would be the only window to act. Night would bring hyenas. The scent of blood already marked her for attention. And though she had not resisted his presence before, touching her would be another matter entirely. The wound needed to be cleaned. If left open and raw through the night, it would fester. He prepared what little he could, a bottle of saline, clean gauze, and a thin strip of cloth torn from his old canvas bag. It was not enough, but it would have to be. He approached from the same arc as before, speaking softly under his breath. "I'm coming, girl. Easy." His tone did not rise, did not falter. The leopard stirred, lifting her head just slightly as he neared. Her ears flicked, and for a brief moment her eyes opened, pupils wide in the fading light. She did not growl. She did not flee. She watched him with the quiet fatigue of something too tired to challenge fate. Kneeling just beyond reach, Samuel waited until her gaze settled again. Then, inch by inch, he moved forward. The saline bottle was uncapped with one hand while the other remained visible, low against the ground. When he reached her flank, her shoulder muscles twitched sharply. Her breath quickened. Still, she did not turn to strike. He whispered again, words meant only to anchor them both in calm. "Almost done." He poured the liquid carefully along the curve of her leg, watching as the blood loosened from her fur and darkened the soil beneath her. The wound stretched along the inside of her thigh, deep, jagged, and torn through muscle. A snare, most likely. No clean bite would have left a line like that. As the fluid flowed over the injury, she flinched hard. Her claws flexed against the grass and her tail flicked once in warning. But her body did not rise. The choice was clear. She allowed it. The next part was slower. Samuel pressed the gauze into the torn flesh, dabbing away what he could, his other hand held steady just beside her rib cage. Her breathing remained fast, uneven, but she stayed still. Every muscle under her skin trembled with restraint. He could feel the tension ripple down her side, a line of power barely held in check. One sudden movement, and she could still end it all. But she did not move. He wrapped the cloth with measured care, tucking it under and around until the wound was no longer open to the air. The binding was rough, but firm. It would hold for the night. With each motion, Samuel moved slower, whispering not in reassurance but in rhythm. His hands learned the contours of her fur, the raised edge of her ribs, the still warm blood drying against his fingers. When the last knot was tied, he pulled back slowly, letting the distance grow again between them. She watched him now with both eyes open, her head lifted higher than before. There was no gratitude in her expression, only the quiet awareness that something had changed. She rested her head down gently, the bandaged leg folding in toward her body. The grass settled around her. Samuel did not move further. He sat a few meters away, knees bent, the used cloth and gauze resting beside him. The air cooled fast after sundown, and the first sounds of insects returned with the dark. He knew she might not survive the night. Infection could still set in. The pain could still push her into flight, and if the dressing slipped, the bleeding might start again. But for now, she has stayed. She had not resisted. The bond had not come from any training, any method. It had come from a shared silence, from the trembling muscle that did not lash out, and from the human hands that did not demand anything in return. If the wound held, she might walk again. If it reopened, she would never return to the wild. Samuel remained where he was, not touching, not speaking, just a present. The darkness stretched wide around them, and in that quiet, the wild held its breath. Morning arrived with the soft gold of a cloudless sky. The leopard had survived the night. Her body lay curled in the same place, chest rising faintly beneath the gauze wrap, breath no longer shallow but still tight. Samuel approached slowly, holding a shallow pan of water and a strip of meat left from the ranger's cold store. His steps were even, his face steady. The distance between them had not changed, but something else had. She raised her head when he neared, the movement more deliberate now, her ears forward, not alert for flight, aware. He set the pan down a few meters away and lowered the meat beside it. Then he stepped back and waited. The leopard stayed still for several minutes, body taut as if bracing. Then, with effort visible in every motion, she shifted her front legs forward, digging her claws lightly into the soil. Her haunches trembled, and for a breath she froze. Then, with a ragged pull, she pushed herself up. It was not graceful. Her body wobbled, weight unbalanced from the wound. The leg stayed lifted. Half dragged behind her as she limped forward, but she moved. One step, then two. She reached the pan and drank with deep, grateful swallows. Her tail twitched slightly behind her, and her eyes flicked toward Samuel only once. He did not move. She paused between drinks to eat, jaws closing firmly around the strip of meat. Blood smeared her muzzle again, but not from injury, from nourishment. Her body shook as she chewed, as though hunger itself had become a strain. Samuel exhaled softly. It was the first real sign she was choosing to live. Over the next 2 days, the pattern held. At dawn and dusk, Samuel brought food and water, always placed at the same spot. The leopard never moved far. She stayed within sight of the outpost, usually curled near the same patch of scrub. Each time he came, she watched. Each time she rose, it was a little quicker, a little steadier. On the third evening, she growled. It was low, brief, more warning than threat. Samuel had stepped 1 meter too close while setting down the pan. The sound stopped him instantly. He raised his hand slightly and stepped back. She did not bare her teeth. She did not lunge, but the growl made something clear. Her strength was returning, and so was her boundary. That night, she lay under the fig tree near the fence line. The stars shimmered above the plain, and the soft clicks of insects filled the dark. Samuel watched from the porch of the outpost, not approaching, just marking her outline in the night. If he misjudged now, if he tried to touch her again or moved too soon, the fragile balance would snap. But if he stayed consistent, calm and patient, something older than language might take root. On the 5th morning, he arrived with food to find her already standing. Her bandage was loose, stained but still holding. She did not retreat as he placed the pan down. She did not growl. She simply stood, waiting. The tension in her legs was less obvious now. Her ribs still showed, but her breath came easier. She moved with intent, not just instinct. Each step she took across the grass was survival in motion, not a recovery complete, but one still unfolding. And with every step, she seemed to say, "I am watching. I am not yours, but I have not left." Samuel kept his rituals the same tone, same distance, same offering. If he altered the rhythm, she might see it as a threat. If he held to it, she might begin to see him not as danger, but as part of the terrain. Not friend, something less than that, but something steady. He knew the risk remained. Her leg could reopen, her strength could falter. If he stopped helping now, her body might not hold out. But if he kept going, if he met her gaze without asking anything more, then trust, or something near it, might grow in the quiet space between them. The leopard circled once before settling into the tall grass. Her tail flicked once, then stilled. Samuel watched as her breathing slowed, the sun rising behind her like a soft veil across the plain. By the second morning, the gauze along the leopard's leg had begun to fray. The cloth clung to the wound in patches, streaked with dust and dried blood, but she was still alive. Samuel spotted her near the old termite mound, lying beneath a thin screen of shade, her head lifted. The position had changed since the evening before, not far, but enough to say she had moved on her own. He stepped closer only after placing the water and food in the same spot as always. She didn't rise, but she didn't look away either. Her body remained thin, but the sharp trembling had dulled. Each day he returned, her gaze met him sooner. Her chest still rose with effort, but not panic. She drank deeply now, licking the edges of the shallow pan until only traces remained. The meat, always lean, always clean, disappeared faster each time. When she stood, it was still a staggered motion. Shoulders first, hind legs following with a shudder. The wounded limb stayed lifted, curled just off the ground, but she bore weight now on the other three. A limp, yes, but movement. Survival. Samuel stayed back, never approaching once she stirred. He understood what each warning meant. On the third day, as he laid the meat closer than before, she rose with a growl, low, firm, not in threat, but reminder. Her eyes narrowed, body stiff. But she did not run. She did not strike. She simply stood her ground and waited. He murmured, understood, and stepped back. The leopard lowered her head slowly, her body relaxing only once he'd retreated. That small exchange mattered more than closeness. It marked the fragile space they now shared, one of boundaries and breath, not trust in its full form, but something adjacent. At night, Samuel watched from the porch. The brush swallowed her silhouette by dusk, but sometimes he could track her position by the rustle of tall grass or the faint shuffle of gravel underpaw. She didn't wander far. She circled within range of the outpost, always returning before morning. This wasn't a habit yet. It was survival. Her leg needed time. Her instincts kept her near the man who brought water. By the fourth day, she rose before he arrived. Her ears flicked at the sound of his steps, head turning sharply toward him. Her body tensed, then held. She remained upright, alert, but not aggressive. Samuel stopped short, unsure if approaching would undo the rhythm. He placed the food further back this time, watching how her tail shifted, how her front paw tapped the dirt once before she stepped forward. Each step was deliberate. She winced when her back leg shifted too much but adjusted. She reached the meat with a quiet huff and tore a strip free, chewing slowly. Samuel didn't move. The air was warm and dry. Wind pressing gently through the grass. Insects buzzed low to the ground. The leopard's muscles twitched as flies landed near her flank. She turned once in a slow arc, then lay down again, curling around her wrapped leg. She was healing, but far from safe. The bandage would need to be replaced. She would need more days like this before her weight could be trusted again. If infection set in, it would undo everything. If she wandered too far too soon, she might be taken by hunger, or by what always waits in the wild for the slow and wounded. Samuel understood the risk in continuing. He also knew the greater risk was stopping. If he left her now, believing she would recover on her own, it might mean collapse before she found water again. If he kept coming, slow and steady, he might see the day she walked without pain. That evening, just before light slipped behind the trees, he saw her sitting upright for the first time. Not resting, not curled in pain, just sitting. Her head high, her chest steady, eyes watching him from the edge of the grass. He did not move closer. He simply nodded once, nothing more, and stepped back into the shelter of the outpost as the sky turned the color of cooling ash. The sky was still pale when Samuel stepped outside. the horizon smeared with the soft gray of first light. The air was cooler than usual, the scent of nightgrass still lingering. He walked the familiar path without sound, water sloshing gently in the pan against his leg, a strip of meat wrapped in cloth in his other hand. But when he reached the clearing near the termite mound, she was already up. The leopard stood tall, her body angled toward the east. All four legs bore weight now. The once dragging limb touched earth with care, no longer curled defensively beneath her. The cloth dressing had slipped loose sometime in the night and lay flattened in the grass behind her. Her coat showed a faint scar along the thigh, the fur darkened but dry. Her shoulders were firm again, ribs still visible but no longer hollowed. She didn't look at Samuel right away. Her ears shifted with the breeze, listening to something deeper in the plain. Her nostrils flared, catching scent from the tall grass ahead. She took one step forward, then paused. Only then did she glance back. Their eyes met. There was no sound between them, no movement. She watched him the way wild things do, without judgment, without affection, just knowing. Samuel stopped short of the usual spot. He set the pan and cloth down, but she didn't move toward them. Her hunger had quieted. Her body no longer begged for help. She turned her head once more toward the open plain. He stood for a moment longer, then stepped slowly toward the narrow gate that bordered the eastern side of the outpost fence, the only opening wide enough for a creature her size to pass without strain. The latch creaked softly as it opened. She didn't hesitate. She walked with slow, balanced strides, the limp reduced now to a faint favoring of her left side. Her tail swung low, her shoulder blades rising smooth beneath the spotted fur. As she neared the gate, Samuel backed away, giving her space. She passed within 10 paces of him, close enough to hear her breathing, to see the way her eyes flicked briefly in his direction. Not wary, not seeking, just marking. At the edge of the grass, she stopped. Her head turned once more, a glance back, no longer in weakness but in quiet awareness. Then she moved forward, vanishing into the tall stalks that caught the morning light. Samuel didn't follow. He stood still as the breeze shifted, carrying the fading warmth of her scent. Her survival now belonged to the wild again. If she was strong enough, she would thrive. If not, she would not return. That was the law she had always lived under. The grass settled behind her, and the path closed. 3 weeks had passed since the leopard vanished into the grass. No signs, no tracks, no sightings reported by other rangers. The meat Samuel left out the following mornings remained untouched, drying beneath the sun. Eventually, he stopped placing it. Her absence had become part of the routine, a silence that no longer asked to be filled. Then, one morning, just after the rains had left the dirt soft and marked, he saw the first print. It was faint, just off the main track that ran east of the outpost. A single paw mark pressed firm into the wet earth. Wide, heavy, no sign of dragging. He crouched beside it and let his fingers follow the arc of the pads. He didn't call it anything, not yet. The next day, another. This time, farther up the trail. And then, nothing. Days passed with no sound, no movement, until the 6th morning, when Samuel took the outer path past the fig trees and felt something shift. A sound, not of wind, not of birds, just the heaviness of presence. He turned slowly. She stepped from the tree line, her form breaking the patchwork of shade and sunlight. The leopard. The same body, the same markings, but different now. Stronger. Whole. Her coat shimmered with the oils of full health. No bandage, no blood. Her movement was fluid, confident. There was no limp. She did not lower herself to the ground. She did not pause in stalk or hesitation. She walked directly toward him. Samuel froze. This was not routine, not instinct. A wild leopard does not return like this. The distance between them closed. 10 meters, then 5. His breath slowed, muscles still. If she changed her mind now, if her intent shifted in an instant, he wouldn't have time to move. But there was no rise in her shoulders, no quickening of breath. Her tail hung low, steady. Her ears stayed forward. She stopped just a few feet from him. For several heartbeats, neither moved. Then she sat. It was the quietest gesture he had ever witnessed. Not a boo, not a crouch, but a choice to be still in his presence. Her chest rose and fell evenly. Her eyes met his, not searching, not pleading, only aware. He didn't speak. Words had no place here. His boots remained planted in the dirt, his hands loose at his sides. Every instinct told him not to reach, not to disrupt the shape of this moment. She remained for nearly a minute, then rose, turned, and walked away. No glance back this time, no limping trail in the dust, just the clean, quiet departure of a creature returning to her own path. Samuel stood for a long while, watching the line where she'd gone. He would never know why she came, whether the memory of water, of calm voice, of pain eased, had drawn her back, or whether something older moved in her that had no name, but she had returned, and not to hide, not to stalk, to be seen. The sky was warm with the colors of evening when Samuel saw her again. This time he wasn't walking the trail. He had simply stepped outside the outpost to check the fencing routine as always. A rustle broke the stillness. Not sharp, not urgent, just movement from the eastern edge. He turned, and there she was. The leopard stood at the clearing's edge, backlit by low light. She walked with the same quiet power he'd seen weeks before, her gait measured, deliberate. No limp, no hesitation. She crossed the dry grass without the cover of brush, without using the trees for shelter. Each step brought her closer. 10 meters, then 5, then just 3. Samuel stood still. She stopped just feet away, not circling, not crouching, just standing, her chest facing him squarely. Then, with slow intent, she lowered her head. Not to rest, not in fatigue, but to press her whiskers against the ground. The gesture was unfamiliar, soft, and deliberate. A moment later, the grass behind her shifted. At first, it looked like nothing more than a shadow, caught in the movement of her tail. But then it stepped into light. Smaller, lighter in frame, still wobbling on young legs. A cub. Its coat dappled with the faint fuzz of youth, the spots still bold against a softer belly. It followed close behind her, nearly touching her flank. And it was not afraid. Samuel's breath caught in his chest. He did not move. The leopard remained lowered for a moment longer, her nose still grazing the dirt. Then she raised her head again, eyes level with his, and stepped slightly to the side just enough for the cub to take one full step into view. It blinked toward him. Then I looked up at her, then back again. She had not returned alone. Whatever impulse had brought her back to this place, it was not for food or water or comfort. She had brought life with her, new life. Her body had healed enough not only to survive, but to carry, to protect, to return. And she had chosen to show it. Samuel remained still, not even breathing deeply now. He understood, without needing to understand. If he reached for anything, even a gesture of acknowledgement, the moment would fold in on itself. If he tried to move forward, even with care, she might see it as danger. But if he stood still, if he stayed inside the silence she had offered, he could witness it. The cub pressed its side against her leg, not in play, but in anchoring. The small body leaned in for safety. The mother did not shift. She allowed it. There was no sound but the wind brushing the tall grass, the faint buzz of evening insects warming into the dusk. The leopard turned her gaze back to her cub, then toward the open plain behind them. A slow choice took shape in her body. She stepped away, turning not sharply but with smooth, practiced movement. The cub followed, walking close to her back foot. She did not look back this time. There was no need. She had delivered the message she intended. They slipped into the tall grass together, disappearing the way only leopards do, without sound, without trace. Samuel lowered himself slowly to the ground, knees finding the earth. He did not speak. The silence held longer than seemed natural, but he didn't move to fill it. She had returned not to ask for help, not even to thank. She had come to show him something. The last light slid low across the plain, stretching shadows long and soft along the earth. The grass swayed gently, rustling in a rhythm older than language. Samuel remained kneeling, eyes fixed on the place where the leopard and her cub had disappeared. The stalks still parted slightly where their bodies had passed, but even that was closing now. Slowly folding shut as if the wild itself was sealing the moment away. No sound followed them. No cry, no rustle. Only the wind, low and warm, passed through the savanna with the kind of stillness that felt like reverence. He didn't rise, not yet. His hands rested on his thighs, fingers loose, breath steady. He knew instinctively that turning away too soon would be a kind of betrayal. Not to her, but to what had just taken place. The sun hung low on the rim of the horizon, glowing amber behind the dust, its light caught in the stems of the grass, painting everything in soft gold. Somewhere far off, a bird called once and then fell silent. It was the kind of stillness that didn't ask for meaning. It simply was. He replayed the moment not in thought, but in feeling. Her arrival, unhurried, unafraid. The way she lowered her head to the earth before revealing the cub. The way she had looked at him. Not questioning, not seeking anything in return. Just allowing him to see. That was the gift. Not the cub, not the return. But it's allowed. The leopard had survived. Against odds, against injury, against every law the wild imposes on the weak. She had healed, carried life, and returned. Not because she had to, but because she chose to. And now she had gone again, back into a world Samuel could not follow. He knew he would never see her again. Leopards were solitary. She had marked her path only once. To return again would be unnatural, unnecessary. This was the final shape of the story. Not a reunion, not a bond to be carried forward, but a single, completed circle. What had happened between them belonged to a space outside of routine, outside of explanation. And still he felt it would stay, not as a tale to be told, but as a presence. On the way he moved through the bush from now on, in how he approached the next animal in need, in how he remained quiet longer, let the silence do more of the work. The wild had trusted him. Just for a moment. And that trust had taken the form of a mother and her cub, standing just feet away, offering nothing but presence. He rose slowly, brushing the dust from his knees, his movements deliberate, careful not to disturb what the evening had settled. He turned back toward the outpost, the sky dimming behind him. The path ahead was quiet. The fence line shimmered faintly in the low light, already distant, already returning to its usual shape. Behind him, the tall grass stood still again. No trail remained, no print. But the memory held. Not of the rescue, not of the healing, but of that moment when a wild leopard brought her cub to the man who once sat beside her as she bled and simply let him see.